I'm speaking today on behalf of Human Rights House Foundation, which, as Andrew mentioned, brings together human rights defenders from more than 80 organizations active across Eastern and Western Europe, the Balkans, and the Caucasus. And my remarks today are drawing on the experience from those individuals within our network. Many of our colleagues across the network work in restrictive or high-risk environments. Some are displaced and work in exile. Others work in contexts where democratic institutions still exist, but pressure on civil society is becoming more systematic, including online. And the central point that I want to make is this, and similar, I think, to what we've heard already this afternoon: digital threats are not peripheral to civil society space. They are now one of the key avenues through which civic space is restricted. When a defender is hacked, a journalist's source is exposed, an organization's website is blocked, spyware monitors private communications or records the intimate home life of an activist, or a smear campaign is amplified online, these are attacks on the ability of civil society to organize, communicate, document, advocate, and be trusted. Across our network, we see different country situations with different challenges, and we should be careful not to equate them. The risks faced by civil society in Belarus or Russia are not the same as those faced in Bosnia and Herzegovina or in Serbia. But there are patterns that help us understand how digital pressure restricts civic space. In Belarus, online association with independent media, civil society organizations, or human rights content can itself become dangerous. Social media activity, subscriptions, reposts, or sharing material labeled as extremist can expose individuals to administrative or criminal consequences. Even seemingly benign digital activities are used as evidence and tools for intimidation. In Russia, the labeling of independent organizations as undesirable, extremist, or even terrorist is reinforced by monitoring online activity and criminalizing cooperation with those organizations. Recent HRHF reporting shows a shift from prosecuting publishers of independent information to intimidating and prosecuting its consumers and its readers, including people who share links, comment in channels, or search for banned materials, including via VPNs. A message, donation, repost, search, or professional contact can become part of a criminal case. In Azerbaijan, digital surveillance and online targeting sit within a wider pattern of pressure against independent journalists, human rights defenders, and civic activists. Device seizures, access to private communications, and misuse of personal data can deepen risks for people already vulnerable to detention, travel bans, and criminal charges. Some defenders in Azerbaijan have even had spy cameras monitoring them within their homes, and the footage later used against them. In the occupied territories of Ukraine, device checks at checkpoints and during searches can expose messages, photographs, contacts, or evidence of civic engagement. Digital traces can lead directly to interrogation, detention, or other serious consequences. In Serbia and in Bosnia and Herzegovina, digital threats are different, but nevertheless still a key issue. Online smear campaigns combined with hostile public narratives serve to reinforce pressure on independent media, activists, minority voices, and human rights defenders. In Georgia, online attacks have accompanied restrictive legislation, administrative pressure, and attacks on protest movements. Coordinated online attacks, trolls, and bots have been used to smear human rights defenders, with some networks reportedly taken down by Meta following work by Georgian fact-checkers. The online environment is not separate from offline political pressure. It helps create the atmosphere in which independent organizations are portrayed and labeled as foreign agents and threats to the state. These examples show different levels of severity but a common function. Digital pressure can make civic work more dangerous, more costly, and less trusted. One of the most serious effects is self-censorship. Surveillance doesn't need to be visible all the time to be effective. It's enough for a defender to believe that their phone may be compromised, messages read, contacts exposed, or participation in a meeting later used against them. My organization's report Protecting Defenders also shows that perceived risk itself affects behavior. People then stop communicating openly, avoid international engagement, decline media interviews, hesitate before documenting violations, and think twice before contacting victims, witnesses, lawyers, or diplomats. This weakens the information available to international institutions, including the OSCE. Digital threats also connect directly to offline harm. In Belarus, a seized phone can expose colleagues, donors, sources, and relatives to interrogation or prosecution. In the Russian Federation, searches of phones, browser histories, banking apps, or email confirmations can turn ordinary online behavior into legal risk, including where people use VPNs to breach blocked information. In occupied Crimea or other occupied parts of Ukraine, a photograph, contact, or a message may be treated as evidence of disloyalty or cooperation with Ukrainian civil society. The digital attack may happen first, but the harm often continues offline. Furthermore, digital threats do not stop at national borders, as we know. Transnational repression is an important part of this discussion. A defender may be physically outside the country, but still within the reach of the state's coercive power. For many defenders in our network, exile or displacement abroad does not lead to complete safety. Belarusian defenders working in Vilnius or in Warsaw may be physically outside Belarus, but their advocacy can still be monitored online and used to pressure relatives or colleagues inside of the country. Russian civil society actors in exile still may face collective risks if contacts inside of Russia are identified through digital communications, public events, online cooperation, donations, or leaked correspondence. This particularly matters for the OSCE. If engagement with the OSCE exposes defenders or journalists to reprisals, then the system must be able to respond robustly, ensuring that the cost of actors carrying out reprisals is high. The tools themselves are an important element in this discussion. Online platforms can amplify smear campaigns against journalists, defenders, minorities, and civil society organizations, with little protection offered to those targeted. Online activity can create an appearance of public hostility and make civil society actors seem isolated or illegitimate. There's also a gender dimension. Women defenders and journalists are often targeted with gendered disinformation, sexualized threats, doxing, and attacks on their families or reputation. The protection gaps are clear. Surveillance and censorship technologies have developed faster than the safeguards designed to control them. Spyware, surveillance, platform blocking, VPN restrictions, and large-scale data collection can be employed with limited transparency and weak oversight. Laws may be vague, poorly enforced, or misused in the name of national security, extremism, counterterrorism, or public order. Accountability remains weak. Victims often do not know who targeted them, what tool was used, or how to prove it. Investigations are rare, and remedies are limited. Tools developed in one jurisdiction may be used in another to target journalists, defenders, political opponents, and diaspora communities. Participating states should not allow their markets, their companies, or procurement systems to contribute to repression elsewhere. Support for civil society is often too reactive. A hacked account, smear campaign, blocked platform, cut-off donation channel, and legal threat can together force an organization to reduce its work, stop communicating, or close entirely. So what should be done? Participating states must strengthen legal safeguards against unlawful and arbitrary surveillance and censorship. Surveillance and restrictions on access to information must be lawful, necessary, proportionate, time-bound, and subject to independent oversight. Vague references to national security, extremism, counterterrorism, or public order should not be used to justify monitoring civil society or people seeking independent information. There must be stronger accountability for the misuse of spyware and surveillance. This includes independent investigations, access to remedy, parliamentary and judicial oversight, transparency around procurement and deployment, stronger export controls, and meaningful due diligence requirements. Companies should not be able to sell tools that are then used to identify, intimidate, prosecute, and silence civic actors. Human rights defenders and journalists need access to tailored digital security expertise, legal support, psychosocial care, safe communications tools, secure equipment, and emergency assistance. But this support should not be framed as a substitute for state responsibility. Resilience is necessary because threats exist. It is not an excuse to tolerate those threats. The OSCE must establish a formal mechanism to monitor and report on reprisals against human rights defenders and journalists for engaging with this organization. Such a mechanism would address a real protection gap. If defenders are targeted because they engage, the OSCE needs a clearer way to identify, document, respond that includes public reporting. Finally, OSCE institutions, participating states, donors, and the international organizations should review their own digital practices where they do not undermine civil society security through insecure channels, unnecessary digital traces, or overly broad information sharing. Let me conclude again with the wider point. Protecting civic space in the digital age requires more than helping civil society adapt to danger. It requires constraining the misuse of digital power. States must stop using surveillance, criminalization, and digital intimidation to restrict legitimate civic activity. They must protect those targeted, investigate violations and abuses, provide remedies, and ensure that private companies are not allowed to turn a blind eye to the repression of civil society actors. Civil society will continue to adapt, but adaptation is not enough. Digital threats to civic space are human rights threats. They require legal safeguards, institutional oversight, corporate accountability, international protection, and sustained solidarity with those most at risk.